My name is Isabel. I'm 36. I wear my hair long because it makes me feel like the woman I promised my 16-year-old self I would become: elegant, steady, unafraid. And I was standing at the altar in a silk dress that fit like a quiet yes when Marco, 47, clean-shaven, jaw framed by a perfectly trimmed beard, hair combed back with the effortless confidence he wears to every room, leaned in for our kiss and whispered, "I'm sorry," so soft the guests heard only applause, but I heard a confession wrapped in a sigh, and I knew why. I didn't flinch. I tasted the word on my lip gloss as if it were a seed I had planted weeks before, expecting it to sprout the very moment we were watched the most. The ocean beyond the glass windows held its breath, the string quartet hung on a suspended note, and I did the only thing a woman can do when the ground gives way beneath a white aisle. I steadied myself on my own name: Isabel, remember who you are. I pulled back a fraction, enough to look at him without blinking. In that half step, in that quiet sliver of air, entire months unspooled, messages read in the glow of a bathroom light, a receipt folded twice and tucked into my wallet, a perfume that didn't belong to me lingering in our hallway like a dare. "I'm sorry." He said it with eyes that asked for mercy, but mercy without truth is just another lie dressed in a tuxedo. I could feel the gaze of my family, their hope pressed into the moment, my mother's hand over her mouth, my father's chin set, my sister leaning forward to read the horizon of my face. I smiled, because fury would have been too easy and because I had already cried the ocean dry at 3 a.m. 2 nights ago, sitting cross-legged on the bedroom floor in my robe with my hairpin stains on the rug, reading a simple text on Marco's phone that didn't even try to be poetic: "I'm late." 2 words. A calendar, not a poem. But I am a woman who reads between lines, and I have spent enough time with blueprints to know that what isn't drawn can be even more important than what is. The sender's photo was a flash of blonde hair, lips too red at a business dinner, a dress meant to be noticed. I knew that face. I had seen it watching him in the reflection of a hotel bar window. I knew what he was sorry for. I had known for days. He tried to squeeze my hands like he could pull me back into the script we rehearsed, like vows can erase evidence if said in the right cadence. The priest cleared his throat, the quartet found the note again, and the applause started to fade into something that sounded like a question. I felt the microphone on its stand to my left like an exit door. I didn't use it. Not yet. I lifted my chin and said the quietest sentence of my life: "Give me a second," and turned slightly so only he could see my mouth when I added, "We don't have to lie in front of everyone." His pupils widened, and for the first time since I met him, charismatic, generous with servers, exacting with deals, the kind of man who fills a suit like he was born in it, he looked small, a boy in a borrowed jacket. "Izzy," he said, then corrected himself because he knows I don't like that nickname: "Isabel, later, please." Later. The word that has kept so many of us caged. Later, when the party is over. Later, when the papers are signed. Later, when I've gathered the courage you're praying I'll lose. But I'm a woman who has built a life on plans that thank me for showing up on time. My life doesn't arrive late to itself. The music stuttered. Someone coughed. Somewhere in the back a woman laughed too brightly, then stopped. I saw her then, front row right, because of course she would sit where the camera could find her cheekbones, the blonde, too young to rent a car without a credit card deposit, voluptuous in a dress that should not be legal at a ceremony, hair like champagne foam, lips lined to be spoken about, eyes glued to Marco as if she'd swallowed the room and was now sipping its last whisper. I had seen her before in our office lobby months ago, an assistant to a vendor, maybe, or a consultant in training who asked for advice she didn't need. And there, resting against her collarbone, hung a thin gold chain with a tiny enamel charm I recognized instantly, a charm I had found the receipt for in Marco's wallet, folded twice, purchased at a boutique that wraps its secrets in silver tissue paper. I didn't have to read the calendar in her text to understand the arithmetic of betrayal. I took a breath that reached my toes. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, but not into the mic, just to the air, and the air carried it anyway. "We're going to take a small pause. People always do what confident women ask." The quartet softened, the priest glanced at me, at Marco, at the program, and settled on the only authority in the room who seemed awake in her own skin, me. I lifted my bouquet and felt the thorns I had insisted the florist leave in, because roses shouldn't have to pretend they're harmless. If you're listening to me now, if your heart is drumming the way mine was in that white-lit moment, I want you to stay with me to the very end, because what I did next isn't about revenge, it's about remembering your worth when someone has budgeted for your silence. Tap the like so this story gets to the woman who needs it tonight. Tell me in the comments what your red flag would have been, and subscribe if you want more first-person stories told exactly as they happened, breath by breath, because I promise, the twist you're waiting for, it's coming. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I reached for Marco's hands again and held them like a farewell, and in a voice only we could hear, I said, I know about her. I know about the text. I know about the necklace. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry, he repeated, but it was the wrong language for the wrong ceremony. He had mistaken apology for absolution. I stepped back 1/2 pace, just enough to choose myself in front of everyone. And then, because every story has an anchor, I turned toward the microphone. Before we continue, I said, and I was smiling in the way a woman smiles when she will not be moved, I need to tell you a short story about truth. And somewhere between the first and second word of truth, the room went completely silent, like a church that suddenly remembers why it was built. Stay with me. It gets louder. My name is Isabel, and long before the kiss I had been learning to translate the dialect of almost, the almost missed calls after midnight, the almost honest explanations, the almost tender hand on my back when I asked a question that landed like a pebble in a lake whose surface he kept too smooth. I want to tell you about the weeks that led me to that aisle, because no one wakes up on a wedding day and hears I'm sorry from a man's mouth without first collecting 1,000 smaller apologies he never said out loud. I met Marco 3 years ago at a charity auction where art people pretend not to be ruthless. He was in a midnight suit, beard trimmed to a whisper, hair as neat as the frames on the wall, and when he laughed the table leaned in. He asked me about my work, interior architecture, the quiet pleasure of making rooms feel like they were always meant to be, and he didn't do the thing men sometimes do, turning my passion into a hobby mid-conversation. He asked good questions. He listened. He slid his business card across the table like a door I could choose to open. I liked the way he said my name slowly, as if tasting a new wine. I liked the way he asked the server for her name too. We moved quickly. Dinners that tasted like new cities, weekend trips that felt like rehearsals for a life we hadn't earned yet. He met my family and didn't flinch at my mother's way of measuring men with her eyes. He learned how I like my coffee, black, but with a single sugar I stir 6 times, not 7. He sent flowers to my office on Tuesdays when there was no reason to, and sometimes he would text me the view from his meetings, just a sliver of a skyline, a slice of sunset, and I would reply with a photo of the fabric I was choosing for a client's sofa, and we would pretend the future is simply made of enough shared pictures. There were differences. He was older, a decade and a bit, which I used to tell myself meant wisdom where I had impatience, steadiness where I had fire. He liked control, the way organized men do. I liked it too. Control looks so much like safety until it doesn't. When he proposed, he did it on a Tuesday, because he said Tuesdays are honest, they don't have the pressure of weekends. He knelt in our kitchen while I was barefoot with a spoon in my hand and a pot on the stove, and he looked up at me like I was a miracle he had finally learned to deserve. I said yes because I believed him. I said yes because I believed me, and the way my own life was leaning toward him like a plant to a window. The first red flag didn't wave, it fluttered. A business dinner with a new supplier, young team, tech adjacent, all gleam and pitch decks, ran late. Marco came home smelling like a cologne I didn't recognize, not expensive, just sugary and insistent, the kind that follows you into elevators. He showered and said he was exhausted, and I watched him sleep with his phone face down on the nightstand, the first time he'd done that since we met. In the morning I made coffee the way he likes it, and he kissed my cheek and said, "You're a wonder," and I told myself to be grateful for a man who notices my small rituals. Then there was the event at the hotel bar. Our firm had just finished a boutique lobby, and we were celebrating with the client. She was there, the blonde I would later see at the front row of my wedding like a warning flare no one could ignore. She was introduced as a consultant, maybe 23, maybe 25, hair down to her waist, a dress that was all curve and invitation, full lips that made other women smudge their lipstick in comparison. She laughed with her head thrown back just a fraction too far, a performance of youth, and when Marco arrived late, his hand rested on her shoulder in that casual way that says, "I am used to this, I have rehearsed it." He didn't notice me notice. I cataloged the moment and paid the check. I wish I could tell you I confronted him right then, but betrayal does not announce itself with a neon sign. It comes in small, reasonable pieces. A text that pings and is answered with a smile to no one. A dinner that moves, then moves again. A weekend away for strategy, which is the word men use when they hope the women they love will stop asking for clarity. I am not proud of what I did next, but I won't apologize for being a woman who knows how to read reality. I looked at his phone one night while he showered. Not his messages, not yet. His calendar. I saw vendor review, 7 p.m., Seabrook, and I knew the restaurant, a place where shadows dress like ambient lighting. The next week the receipt appeared, as if it wanted to be found. I was searching for a stamp in the drawer where he keeps nothing and everything, watch batteries, paper clips, ticket stubs from movies he pretends not to cry at, and there it was, folded twice, a small gold necklace with a white enamel charm. The note on the receipt said "Rush" in a handwriting that wasn't his, and the sales associate had added a heart. I asked him about it over dinner. He said it was for his niece. He does have a niece. She is 6. The charm on the receipt was not what a 6-year-old wears. I chewed my salad and swallowed my doubt like it was a vitamin that would eventually make me stronger. Sometimes the truth arrives like a song on a radio you didn't turn on. The bathroom light at 3:07 a.m., his back to me, the glow on his face, the quiet tap-tap of a reply he drafts, erases, drafts again. I stayed still, breathing slow, performing sleep, and when he left for the kitchen I took the phone, his trust lying there like a dare, and I didn't read conversations, because I am not a thief of words, but I saw the preview of a message that slipped past his lock screen, "I'm late." 2 words. No emoji, no exclamation point, no drama. Just the quiet gravity that changes a room. I put the phone back exactly where it had been, because if I have to find out who I am in crisis, I will not also become someone I don't recognize. I did my own math. I did our math. I made an appointment with myself in the mirror and asked the woman with long hair and a spine that has carried her through more renovations than heartbreak, "What do you want to be true about you after this?" And the answer was not a wife. The answer was a woman who doesn't abandon herself to be chosen. I told no one, not even my sister, because I needed silence to hear my own voice. I went to the tailor and asked her to add a hidden pocket to the lining of my dress. Women have always had to sew their secrets where men cannot see them, and into that pocket I slipped a small folded index card with 3 sentences on it, in case my courage failed me at the altar and I needed words that would behave. I met with the venue manager and asked for one small favor. If I were to ask for the mic before the reception, would he bring it to me without question? He nodded. He has seen things. On the morning of the wedding, my mother brushed my hair like she did when I was a child, and I watched us in the mirror, her gray threaded through her dark, my face a map of hers, and I wanted to tell her everything, but I didn't. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted to choose my life in my own voice. And so I walked down an aisle that had always been mine, to a man who thought he knew which words I would say, and when he leaned in and whispered "I'm sorry," I understood he had finally learned the language I had been speaking all along. And that is how we arrived at the moment when I looked at the blonde in the front row and realized that secrets don't stay seated, they stand, they breathe, they wait to be named. The room was ready. So was I. I didn't take the mic to burn the room down, I took it to light a path out. There's a difference. I nodded to the venue manager, the smallest tilt of my chin, and he moved with the careful speed of someone who has lived through other people's moments. The quartet went quiet as if pressed by an invisible hand. I felt the weight of the bouquet, the silk of my dress rubbing a tremor into my skin, the thorns I'd left on purpose biting my palm just enough to keep me awake in my own body. "Thank you," I said, and my voice carried without effort. "Thank you for being here, for loving us through the messiness of becoming a family." Eyes softened. Shoulders dropped. I could hear my aunt whisper, "She's glowing," and it made me smile, because I wasn't glowing, I was studying. "I want to tell you a very short story," I continued, "about the difference between almost and enough." I turned to Marco. I loved him. Love is not erased by proof, it is tested by it. "When we met," I said, "I thought the best thing about us was how we looked forward. But the best thing about us was always how we told the truth. Today deserves that." I could see the exact instant he realized where we were going. He opened his mouth to interrupt, then closed it, because he knows interrupting me has never gone well for him. He nodded, once, a small absolution he couldn't offer. I faced the guests again. "I will not ask for anyone's judgment today," I said. "I will not hand this room the pleasure of a scandal. I will ask only for your listening." And then, because I believe in names, I said one. "Lena." The blonde flinched as if pulled up by a wire. Her dress, a pale champagne that might as well have been a spotlight, clung to curves designed for attention, her hair poured over her shoulder like a promise, her lips, full, glossy, parted in a tiny sound I didn't force the mic to catch. "I'm not here to humiliate you," I told her, and I meant it, "but I'm also not here to disappear myself so you can stay comfortable." Marco moved a step closer, a reflex he couldn't suppress. "Isabel," he began, but I raised my hand and he stopped. That, at least, remained true. He has always known when my hand meant enough. "Someone I love made a mistake," I said. "More than one. Someone I love forgot that I am not a woman who can be loved in pieces." The room held me. Even the air waited. "I found out 2 nights ago," here I swallowed, counting to 3 in my head the way I do before walking into a difficult meeting, "that there is another story unfolding alongside ours. And I also found a necklace I did not receive." I looked at Lena's collarbone, at the small white enamel charm. "It suits you," I told her softly, and it did. "But I won't wear borrowed truth." A murmur, the kind that thinks it's whispering. My mother took one step into the aisle. My father placed a hand on her arm. My sister stared at Marco with a fury I recognized from our childhood when boys thought our bikes were community property. The priest's mouth became a thin line, not from shock, from grief for the liturgy he loves. Here is what I did not do. I did not say pregnant, though the word sat heavy in the lining of my dress, folded next to my emergency sentences. It was not my news to announce to a room that could not care for it. I did not show the text message. I did not catalog the evenings, the lies, the half-truths that keep wives and fiancés awake. I did not take from Lena what Marco had given her in private, because the older I get the more I value the difference between witness and spectacle. I turned to the priest. "I can't make a promise today that will be honest tomorrow," I said. "Not if we pretend this didn't just happen." He nodded, more pastor than officiant now, more human than script. Marco said my name again, this time like a prayer you say when you know the church is already empty. "I want to fix it," he said, voice cracking on the last word, and I believed him. I simply didn't believe in the fantasy that the wanting could happen on schedule. "Then fix it," I replied, "but don't ask me to carry the cost of your timing." Someone sobbed in the back. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God, though God has seen worse in the temple." I took off my ring, not with drama, just with the simple care of removing a delicate thing before it's damaged, and I set it on the small table where the vows lay. I thought about the index card in my pocket and decided to keep it there. My body had remembered the sentences without reading them. We are going to pause this, I said to the room. Not cancel, not destroy, not pretend we were never brave enough to try. Just pause. Because the word wife is too sacred to wear like a bandage. I looked at Lena and said, "You deserve honesty too." She nodded, tears gathering like she had thought she would be the main character and only now understood the difference between plot and consequence. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then managed, "I didn't want it like this." She sounded very young. I believed her too. The world chews up girls who are told their power is only in their beauty. I am not the one who will add teeth to that story. I offered Marco one last sentence, a bridge he could cross if he dared. "If, one day, you can tell the truth in full sentences without asking me to shrink to fit them, call me." It wasn't a promise, it was a boundary with a door. Then I did something simple and impossible. I turned to the guests and thanked them. "Please stay," I said. "Eat." Toast to love, the ordinary kind that feeds you when no one is watching. Laughter, the relieved, aching kind, rolled through the chairs like a tide. My sister was at my side in 3 strides, arms around me, her hair in my shoulder, whispering, "I'm so proud of you," and behind her, my mother finally let herself cry, tears she'd been saving since I learned to walk. We didn't throw a bouquet. We broke bread. The quartet played songs you can talk over. People told stories about their own paused promises. The room remembered me, not as a bride who ran, but as a woman who stayed with herself. Near the end, before the sun finished polishing the ocean into evening, Marco approached. He looked older, not by years, by honesty. "I'm going to make it right," he said. "I'm going to tell the truth." I nodded and pressed his hand once, because kindness where possible is a luxury I hope to always afford. "Good," I said. "Start there." And when I left the venue, shoes dangling from my fingers, hair loosened from its pins, I did not feel like a tragedy, I felt like a beginning. The day after the non-wedding, my apartment smelled like peonies and resolve. My dress hung on the closet door as if it were sleeping off a long night. I brewed coffee and stood barefoot by the window, the city quieter than usual, and I asked the question women are taught to skip: what do I need now, not later, not when it's convenient for everyone else, now? I needed air. I needed the version of myself that exists before anyone says my name. I called my sister and we walked to the park in our oldest sneakers, hair in ponytails, sunglasses big enough to hide behind if we wanted to, and we didn't talk about Marco first. We talked about the birds that don't care about ceremony, the dog that kept retrieving a stick too large for his mouth, the woman on a bench reading a book she was clearly in love with. Then, when our breathing found a rhythm, I told her about the 3 a.m. text, about the necklace, about the way Lena had looked at me like we were all born into scripts we didn't write. "What are you going to do?" my sister asked, which is sister for "do you want me to slash his tires?" I laughed, and it felt like choosing sunlight on purpose. "I'm going to live," I said. "I'm going to work and sleep and call my mother and water my plants and remember that I am allowed to want a life that doesn't require me to argue for my dignity every day." Marco texted that afternoon, "Can we talk?" I replied with boundaries. We spoke on the phone that evening, and his first sentence was finally complete. "I cheated," he said, voice steady, no passive structures, no mistakes were made. He told me he had met Lena through a vendor, that he had liked the reflection of himself he saw in her attention, that when the text arrived he had felt both terror and a strange relief because secrets are heavy and he is not as strong as he imagined. "I am so ashamed," he said, and I told him shame is only useful if it becomes change. He apologized without pleading, which almost undid me. It is hard to stop loving someone who finally speaks your language. I told him I didn't know if I could forgive him, not because I wanted to punish him, but because forgiveness is a place you arrive at with your full body, not a word you rush towards so you can call the story neat. He asked if we could try counseling. I said we could, one day, maybe, after truth had a season to prove itself. But we won't plan another wedding while we're still unlearning this, I said. We won't decorate a house to cover a hole in the floor. He whispered, "Thank you," and the line went quiet in the way it does when two people hold a fragile thing by its edges. And Lena, because stories with younger women in bright dresses often end with their names turned into lessons, she wrote to me. A message that began with "I'm sorry," and I held my breath, because I never wanted to be the older woman to whom girls apologize for being young in public. "I didn't know about the wedding until it was too late," she said. "I told him I couldn't keep talking to him. I told him to tell you. I know you may hate me, but I wanted you to know. I'm not late after all. It was a scare. I'm fine." I sat with that for a long moment, the relief, the ache, the way fear can turn strangers into mirrors. I wrote back, "Take good care of yourself. Ask for more than attention. You deserve more than being a secret." She replied with a single heart, and I didn't need more. Weeks passed. People love a story with a wedding day twist, and for a while I was the woman people whispered about in grocery aisles. Then, as all whispers do, it faded, and what remained was the steady work of living. I returned to my projects, hands-on materials that don't lie, wood that splits if you mishandle it, stone that holds its history, fabric that tells the truth about wear. My clients noticed a new calm in me. "You're even better at this," one said, and I smiled because pain is a terrible teacher but an effective editor. It cuts what we don't need. Marco and I met twice, once in a therapist's office with chairs that made honesty easier, once at a cafe where the barista knew my name and not his. He told me he was in individual counseling. He said he had told his family everything, which means he had finally stopped asking me to hold his consequences. We didn't decide our future. We decided our present. No vows until trust isn't an adrenaline sport. One evening, months later, I took the dress from the closet. I didn't sell it, because I hadn't failed it. It had done its job. I slipped it on barefoot and stood in my living room with no audience and no aisle, and I said a vow out loud to a woman I am still learning to love: "I will not abandon you to be chosen." My voice didn't shake. I cried a little, quietly, the good kind, the kind that clears space. I thought about the mic, the room, the way people stayed and ate and laughed because truth, when spoken gently, doesn't ruin a feast, it blesses it. Will Marco and I try again? Maybe. I don't know. What I know is that I did not lose a wedding day. I found a language. I learned that the bravest thing a woman can do sometimes is to pause the story where everyone expects a happy ending and choose a true middle instead. And I learned that "I'm sorry," whispered against a kiss, can be the beginning of a life you were always meant to claim, if you listen to what your bones already knew. If you've walked with me all the way here, if you felt your own breath catch at the altar and your own hands shake at the mic, I want to ask you for something simple that matters more than it seems. Tap the like so this story finds the next woman standing at her own threshold. Tell me in the comments the promise you're making to yourself tonight, and subscribe if you want more stories told in a voice that makes room for your courage. Because the next twist might be yours, and when it arrives, I want you to hear these words in your own mouth. I will not disappear to make anyone comfortable. I will not. I will not.